I hope you're having a great time. Where was everybody before this?
Measuring social.
Oh, yeah. I want to be in that one. That's definitely something I want to know how to do. Other things? What was your key takeaway from measuring social impact?
Probably that like for-profit and non-profit are kind of antiquated terms, and that there's really like a very much a combination of both that's going on.
Yeah, it's so cool right now, actually. Hopefully our legal structures, they're trying to catch up slowly.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So my name's Anke Wessels. Thank you, John, for inviting me here. This has been really great. I'm looking forward to the rest of the symposium. I live in Ithaca, New York. I am the director of an organization called the Center for Transformative Action. Cool name. We're a nonprofit that's affiliated with Cornell University. And what we do is our mission is really to foster change makers to create communities that are just, sustainable, equitable, and work for everybody. So that's our mission. The way in which we do that is we provide education to change makers, whom we're now calling social entrepreneurs, innovative individuals who want to do what you're doing, sort of change the world, create, make our communities more equitable, reduce social injustices, transform our societies, enhance sustainability, alleviate poverty, eliminate racism, all those things. So I teach a course at Cornell on social entrepreneurship. I've also organized the Finger Lakes Social Entrepreneurship Institute, which brings together students, faculty from the university, but also people in our community and throughout the Finger Lakes who are doing social entrepreneurship. So we held our first one last year, and we're planning our second one to happen this fall. So that's a little bit about what I do. Billy Parrish asked us yesterday sort of what our purpose is in life. You know, based on the mission of my organization, really I feel like the thing I wrote down was my purpose is to be an educator and collaborator in the work of creating communities that are just, sustainable, equitable, and really work for everybody. And I know also one of the things that I ended up writing down beneath that are sort of what are the values that drive me. And one of the things I realized is this South African concept of Ubuntu, which I wrote over there. It's really important to me and encapsulates what I've been feeling for quite some time, probably really ever since I was quite young. I am what I am because of who we all are. I'm really recognizing the interconnectedness between all of us, and that who I am is really a reflection of and dependent on the well-being of others. It's also an important way, I think, of understanding privilege. I am what I am because of who we all are in some cases. For instance, my mother grew up in Nazi Germany, and I very much feel that, you know, the fact that I had a grandmother who lived to be 98 years old, where a lot of my sort of Jewish peers didn't have that. That's an important thing for me to hold on to and to acknowledge. I am what I am because of who we all are. There's many ways of understanding that. What's important to me right here in this conversation, I want to frame this conversation about this very valuable tool called the Business Model Generator Canvas by talking a little bit about the role I see of social entrepreneurs in creating an economy that works for everybody. So as you all know, the economy in the United States at this point in time, the economic inequality in our country is incredibly severe, and as severe as it was in, the 1920s. basically. We're looking at income inequality that we haven't seen in quite some time. So 1% of our population between 1979 and 2007, 1% of our population saw their incomes triple. 80% of our population saw 20%, if that, increase over those 30 years in their income. The share of income in our economy is such that the top 1% have seen their share double, right? The 80% has seen their share decrease. The middle class has seen stagnant increase, stagnant income. For people of color in our economy, there are such significant, there's such significant structural racism still in our society that the chances for people of color to gain quality education, to gain quality jobs, to gain access to wealth creation is far more diminished than for white folks. Right, so in 2018, 45% of the jobs in the United States will require a degree past high school. 43% of white Americans have a degree, a post-high school degree. 27% of African Americans, 26% of US-born Latinos, and 14% of foreign-born Latinos. There are 6 million kids ages youth ages 18 to 24 who do not have a job and are not going to school. That group is disproportionately kids of color. These disconnected youth are more likely to end up in the criminal justice system. These are just some examples of the ways in which people of color in our society still experience barriers to quality education, quality jobs, and wealth creation. What that means is, as a society, we're playing on the economic court with our hands tied behind our back, or half our team is not even near the court. Imagine how much stronger we would be as a team, how much more competitive we would be, if you will, if all of us were on the court playing to our full potential. All of us are diminished by the fact that by 2042, half our population will be people of color. That almost half our population does not have access to reaching its full potential. So what does that mean about who I am when that is what all of us, what the whole looks like? My feeling is that social entrepreneurs play a huge role in creating an economy that works for everybody. So there's this concept that equity is the superior driver for economic growth. There are some leading economists, and John just left, there are some leading economists who are saying that in the past it was it's a common economic belief that economic inequality is actually an important driver for economic growth. Right? Because when there is economic inequality, all of us as individuals want to use our personal resources and the resources around us most productively to advance, because we're afraid, right? There's sort of this scarcity. So we want to use our resources as productively as possible. So income inequality is actually a very efficient way to achieve economic growth. We all individually use our resources as productively as possible, and collectively that causes the economy to flourish. But since the 1990s, because of the income inequality, there are some leading economists who are starting to recognize, or argue anyway, that income inequality is a drag on economic growth. when 1% has such a huge share of the economic growth, is sort of hoarding, if you will, or it's at least it's flowing towards them, effective demand starts to diminish because 80% of us have reduced or stagnant incomes. So effective demand is decreased. Those who, the 1% are investing that resource in order to make more money, and there's a drag on economic growth. So, but that's the bad news, but the good news is that for those of us who are working towards achieving equity, reducing social inequities, reducing poverty, eliminating racism, enhancing environmental sustainability, encouraging creativity. Those of us who are doing that kind of work are actually not just doing that because it's morally just, but also because it's economically prudent. So social entrepreneurs play a huge role because the kind of ventures we create adhere or embody the social values that I was just talking about. So the kind of ventures, and that brings me to this, the kinds of ventures that we create embody the values that we uphold, not only in terms of what we produce or the services that we provide through our ventures, but also how we do that, who we employ, being intentional about providing employment opportunities for all kinds of people, providing leadership opportunities for a diverse group of people, providing volunteer opportunities through our ventures for a diverse group of people. So we become intentional about this. How can we provide job opportunities or volunteer opportunities or leadership opportunities through our ventures for those who are disenfranchised in our community, economically disenfranchised? Maybe there are returning veterans in our community. How our ventures, those are the questions we ask as we build our ventures and work hard to sustain so that we're living our values as well as producing something of social value through our work. So the business model canvas doesn't necessarily you don't necessarily have to adhere to social values to use the business model canvas, but I'm going to start talking about how we might layer those on as I go through it. So let me talk about the business model canvas. So it comes from, if you go to businessmodelgeneration.org, you can find this canvas. You can download it, you can print it large like I did here, or you can print it small like I'm going to show you here. So I'm going to hand out and choose which you'd like to work from. There's a nonprofit model and a for-profit model. They are very, very similar, just slightly different. There's also a book called Business Model Generation, which is excellent. You can download the first, I think it's 70 pages for free. It's really all you need. If you don't want to purchase the book, just download that. There's an iPad app for $45 that will allow you to work the business model canvas on an iPad. All right, so that said, there are 9 components to the business model. There's one nonprofit and one for-profit. They're marginally different. Choose what you want. If you have one you don't want, it's really, the differences are very minor.
I think that's the other. I think that's the other.
Just make sure everybody has one in front of them. So, okay. So, why is this, let me just, as an overview, this tool is very valuable and useful, I think, because it shows on one very simple map all 9 components of a business model. Often, when people do a business model, they write it out in text. This is a visual that puts all 9 components on one map and allows you to see how any change in one component affects the whole. So, is there somebody here who has a venture they're working on or works with an organization that we might use as an example? Yeah?
I work with an NGO. They work with deaf women
Okay.
in Pakistan.
Okay, what are they called?
Family Educational Services.
Family Educational, is it all right so if we use this as an example?
Yeah, sure.
So, you want to write the name of your project at the top, Family Educational Services?
Mm-hmm.
You can also have a project that you're working on. Maybe it's, I want to travel the world. I want to apply to grad school. It could be any project that you're working on, and you can use, with some slight modifications, you can use this model to map out that project too. So tell us a little bit about your organization.
Okay, so they basically work with 3 different sets of societies, like women, orphans, and deaf people. So the project that they will be doing this summer is for deaf women, and they're going to give them vocational training, like stitching and screen printing, and they're going to have 20 women participate in this project.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. So we have an overview sense. So what we want to do is start over here. In a business, this is where we would write our customer segments. In a nonprofit, we often call these people, instead of customers, participants or collaborators. So you just identified, you said they work with
Deaf women.
deaf women,
Well, deaf people in general.
the deaf,
Yeah, and women,
women,
and orphans.
and orphans. And this is a nonprofit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So where do they get their funding from?
They fundraise, they have this huge concert in March, and also a lot of companies in Pakistan give money to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as a nonprofit, you will always in this group include your donors as a customer segment or a participant group. The reason is because you are providing value to them as a nonprofit. People donate to nonprofits to get value just as much as they do when they purchase an apple. They get value from purchasing an apple, they get value when they donate to a nonprofit organization. So you will want to, and so in their case, these were, you mentioned donors and sponsors.
Mm-hmm.
These are also a participant group for whom this organization is providing value. So those are the segments that this organization is serving. Those are the people for whom it's providing value. There's a problem that they're helping to solve or a need that they're helping fulfill. That's how we think through who our customers are or our participant groups. So as we're doing this, if there's some project you're working on, you can start thinking about these things and apply them to your project as we work this through with, I'm sorry, your name?
Rabia.
Rabia?
Rabia, yeah.
Rabia?
Mm-hmm.
So it's helpful then to move to this middle segment, which is the value proposition. For each of our customer segments or our participant groups, we have a different value proposition. That's why they're different. That's why these are different. Okay, for Middlebury, for instance, Middlebury, obviously the students are a customer segment. Alumni might be. The community, possibly those who work here, right? These are people, different segments for whom Middlebury has a different value proposition. Okay? So in your case, what is the value proposition of this organization?
What like outcomes do they have?
No, so value proposition is some kind of unique value that you're bringing to that segment of people.
Oh, okay.
So, like Middlebury provides education, but it provides, you could have gone anywhere. You know, there are lots of institutions that provide education, but you came here for a particular reason. What is that? So,
I mean, yeah, it's different for all three of them, but for
Okay,
the
good.
deaf, it would probably be sign language and
okay, so
vocational
that's a
training.
service.
Yeah.
So, when we think about value proposition, it's not what we're providing. It's more about, so it's not the activity that we're providing them, but the value that we're bringing them. So is there something around, with respect, so for the deaf, they're providing sign language services?
Yeah, sign language and vocational training. So it's really hard for the deaf to get jobs, obviously, because they don't have that kind of ability to like speak with customers and everything. But they do provide them with vocational training, like stitching clothes or like screen printing on cloth, so that they can make those goods and then sell them in the market.
Mm-hmm.
So they still have like a source of income with that. But I don't know what the value proposition would be for that.
So there's something in there around economic independence and
Yeah.
empowerment.
Yep.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Does anybody else have other ideas around that? So that's for the deaf.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say the value proposition is to women?
It's actually pretty much the same.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say it's almost the same because the women get vocational training as well. It's just a way for them to get out of poverty, and they also do like self-defense courses. So I don't know what the value proposition would be again, but
Yeah, so there's something around empowerment,
yeah,
self-reliance.
yeah, exactly.
Is there a solidarity? Is there a network of support?
Yeah, so they have counselors for women who have gone through trauma or violence.
Great.
Yeah.
So there's something maybe around safety,
Mhm. Yeah.
empowerment, safety, a
Empowerment.
safe space.
Yep.
Okay.
What's that status at all in their society?
Sorry?
Status?
Status.
In their society, where if they're providing an income
Yeah.
to the family, does that help?
Like, are you asking if that's an outcome of?
I'm just curious.
Oh.
Yeah.
Might be.
Empowerment.
It's mostly, yeah, just to get them more self-reliant, because, yeah, I don't know.
And for the orphans?
The orphans, they do this summer camp every summer where they go to this orphanage in one of the outskirts of the city, and they do a lot of activities with them just to provide them with support, and yeah, it's mostly like teenage volunteers who go work with the orphans, so it's more like support.
Okay, so what would you say is again, we want to differentiate the value proposition from the activity.
Yeah,
So they provide, there's a camp, right?
yeah.
What is it that the orphans are getting from going? So there's a difference, right? So at Middlebury, you go to a class and you attend a class, let's say.
Yeah.
You get a degree. All right.
I
That's
guess
an
the camp
outcome.
would be just a way for them to like let out their emotions through art. Like we do a lot of art therapy and music, and just a way for them to realize there's someone out there for them, and just like a lot of art, music, painting, I don't know.
Right, so what would you, like, there's something in there about empowerment,
Yeah.
self-understanding,
Yeah.
self-esteem,
Yeah, self-esteem, definitely.
Self-esteem? So what you'll realize when you do this map, that actually if you do only these two things, especially at the start, that you gain incredible clarity about what your organization is about. Whom is it serving, and what's, not in terms of the activities, but why? Like, what need is your organization filling? Right? The need for women to feel empowered and be economically self-reliant. The need for these orphans to gain self-esteem. That is the thing. Basically, if you could just boil it down to one thing, that's what your organization is providing. Right? And there could be a gazillion things that you're doing, but to narrow it down to, and like to fine-tune it into like a set of words, one word, preferably, but maybe 3 or 4, is really, really valuable work. It's valuable, you know, when you give a pitch, this is it. Whom am I serving and what value am I providing them? That is the crux of the pitch, right? You want to have it be, you know, something that people get right away. When you start saying, well, we do these classes and we're like doing all this stuff, it's like, okay, but what's the point of all that? And this makes it very clear. And then to the donors, why do you think donors, what value are the donors getting, or the sponsors?
Well, it's obviously benefiting the whole society, right? So they see the value in that, but also just like at random events, we have banners and all the donors' names are put on it, and it's like advertisement for them. So
there's
and also
some
just
kind of
the
brand
image,
value,
yeah,
or
just the image of the company
image.
goes up just by the fact that they're helping out all these people.
Yeah, and so that's something that's sort of tangible that they're getting, and then I'm sure they care.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's something about they actually care about.
Society.
Are any of these sponsors potential employers for these women or not?
Yeah, some of them are, like Shell, the Shell company. They actually employed a lot of deaf people on the petrol stations, so that was good. Yeah.
So there's something in there for them around. It's not just sort of looking good for them. It's
Yeah.
also there's a value there for them to support this work because it makes an environment for their company that is beneficial.
Yeah, and it also is like it's different, right? So it gives them a better image than other companies. It like singles them out.
Right. So we want, I'm just going to put the image brand thing in here. But also, that's what we call that.
Recognition.
Okay. All right. So these two things can take some organizations a lot of time to figure out, especially if you've sort of built a lot of services or a lot of programs or have a lot of things in mind. So that happens to most of us when we start, oh, I want to do this, 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 and this, and the list gets really long. And then it becomes hard to define exactly what you're trying to achieve in Portland. This column here, relationships. What we mean by that is what characterizes the relationship? What kind of relationship do your customers or your participants want to have with you? Sometimes, like with Amazon.com, when I go there to buy something, I don't really have a relationship with the organization, the company. I don't really want it. Right? It's not important to me. That's a very low-touch relationship between me and Amazon.com. But Billy Parrish yesterday, when he went to the local bookstore and talked to Becky, he received a very high-touch relationship with Becky. Let me see if we have that book. We don't have that book. I know somebody who does have that book. Let me give them a call. Should I drop it by where you're staying? Very high touch. And you see the difference, the importance of defining what kind of relationship this is going to be is because Becky spent time with Billy. On the phone and then in person, getting the book, bringing it over. She had to spend a lot of time to create that high touch relationship. Low touch relationship, not so much time. Not bad. My interaction with Amazon is not bad, right? But it's just different. And then there's something in between, like, what's the place where we get shoes from online?
6 p.m.
Zappos, right? Zappos is a little bit like Amazon, except they'll give me an email and make it seem like I have a personal relationship with them, right? Hey, guess what? We said it would arrive in 2 days. It's really going to arrive tomorrow. We can't wait to, blah, blah, blah. Deliver our shoes to your door, right? Okay, so what kind of relationship do these customers want to have with this organization? And how would you, so if we're thinking about characterizing it, not exactly what it is, but how we characterize it. Is it, and high, low, medium touch is a good way of thinking about it. Trust, personal, tailored, distant, those are the kind of words we want to think about.
Yeah, it's definitely really personal. The owners of the organization are always very involved with all these people, and they make it a point that they always make sure, like they always talk to each one of them. What else?
And what about the donors? What kind of relationship do they have with them?
I think that is a lot more professional. Like they have meetings and they clearly tell them what they have, like, I don't know. I'm not entirely involved with that process. I don't really know.
So we can think about it. So for instance, some nonprofits are like, thank you very much for your donation, and then they don't get in touch with them until next year.
Oh no, they make sure that they're always sending them like cards for holidays.
Okay, so it's actually kind of high touch.
Yeah.
And this is one place where nonprofits often fail to maintain this relationship with their donors.
Mm-hmm.
Some donors are actually happy to just send a check once a year and have that be it. But others, especially when they're sending $10,000 checks, they actually might want to have more of a relationship.
Yeah. I have a question like in a similar vein on this question of high touch and who you're being in high touch or low touch with. I work for a nonprofit that was very high touch in the sense you're talking about of like constantly sending things to like companies like Shell that were funding us and having like a big sort of gala at the end of the year where like everybody came and they had the women who they were funding in these like entrepreneurial roles come to talk to all of these donors about their experiences being given money and the organizations they were working with. But for me, observing this whole process, it actually felt the dynamic between those constituents of the help that they were giving of entrepreneurial training and their relationship to the donors felt really disturbing to me in a weird way.
Exploitative?
Or that there was just a lot of like cultural difference and it seemed like although the nonprofit was doing all the right things in terms of the high touch thing towards their donors, it just felt like it was hard to maintain a real relationship in both directions. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There are some weird juxtapositions like organizations that are raising money to feed people, and the way they do that is they have a big gala banquet that costs, $300 a head. So all those, people they're serving obviously can't attend. It just feels kind of weird.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, just to comment about that, with this NGO, what they did was really good was that they like made the companies like also give volunteers to help out with the deaf and women. So we would get like 20 volunteers from Shell who were very involved and very like passionate about the cause. So that created like a link between the donors and the people who the NGO was working for. But like yeah, at like dinners and stuff, if those like big CEOs would come, they wouldn't really have any connection with the deaf and women, so that wouldn't really work out. But just like sending volunteers from the company, it helps quite a bit.
So this is one place where your social values, the conversation about your social values and how you're living those values has to be explicit, right? And some of the, some of these trade-offs, maybe it's important to have the gala event for the donors. But to be explicit and to understand what it is that you're giving up, are you compromising maybe on your values, or is there a way to be more inclusive? Asking yourself those questions seems to me to be really important. Yeah, I'll just go ahead.
What indicators do you use for gauging the relationship, whether it should be high touch or medium touch?
Well, the way the question is framed is what kind of relationship do your customers or your participants want to have with you?
Okay.
So that's one way of gauging that. So for instance, in the work that I do with our projects, one of the services that they benefit from is that we actually tailor our services to them. And so they come to us for that, and they like that. So here, these are the channels, and what that means is, how do you reach out to these constituents so that they know that you exist? It's the marketing PR piece, but it's also how do you deliver your services. So Middlebury has a website. It has, it probably has representatives in different communities that go to high schools to talk about, hey, have you considered coming to Middlebury? Those are channels through which it reaches out to the students. It has all sorts of ways of reaching out to alumni, holding events, etc. And then there are the deliverables. How do we deliver our educational services? Well, we have this campus, we have classrooms, we have, programs that bring students abroad. Those are the ways in which we deliver our services. So what would you say about your organization?
Yeah, so it's pretty much the same. They have a website. They go to different schools and like spread awareness and ask for volunteers. They have this huge charity concert in March where they advertise, and just by like sending emails constantly to different sets of people.
And then they actually like have whole classes for these?
Yeah, all year round, yeah.
Right. So it gives you a sense of what we mean by channels. Now it's important to map these things out because these are key areas where you're going to spend time. When you have high-touch relationships, you got to make sure you're spending time there, right? And a lot of time ends up getting drained there and isn't being used for other purposes. But it's important, right? The channels, how you're going to create these channels, you're spending time developing those, both in terms of delivering your service as well as marketing, public relations. This is also, so in terms of the social values piece, if you're trying to reach out to a diverse group of people, you may think about tailoring your channels depending on those groups. Right? How are you going to reach the war veterans? If you want to bring war veterans into your organization or have them have access to your services, well, how are you going to reach them? Right? How are you going to reach the different communities that you're trying to reach? In some cases, you might have to look for the leaders in those communities and talk to them and develop a relationship with them first, so that they can then tell their other people in their community about your work, because they trust you and those community members trust them, and that's the way in which you're going to do it. So being intentional about your social values can mean changing some of the ways in which you're developing your channels, reaching out to people, thinking about your relationships. Some groups, the kind of relationship you're developing with them may look different than with other groups. You may also be very clear about these social values in your value proposition when you're articulating your value proposition. So this side is the side of what you're doing and why. Now we're going to go over to this side. These are the key activities that support this work. And then these are the key resources. And I'm looking at the clock, it's 4:15. Would it go okay? I understand people have to leave, but if we could take an extra 10 minutes, we could get through this. Is that all right for most groups? Okay, thanks. So the key activities for all of this, right? Developing the relationships, developing the channels, delivering the services to these people. So what would you say are the key activities for this organization?
So for the deaf, there's sign language classes,
Right?
vocational training. For women, there are self-defense classes, and also they've opened schools in different cities, so they're providing education to women. And for orphans, there's a summer camp every summer.
Okay, so this is a really important thing to notice, right? She focused on the programs. Those are the services, right? This is what we're doing. And then there's all the stuff for these things too, right? So there's a website getting developed, there's PR materials getting written, there are relationships being developed.
Budget for the year.
I'm sorry?
They have to make the budget for the year.
Budget development, governance,
Yeah.
board development, HR management, like there's all this other stuff happening to make the organization work. So those things you would want to list here too as the key activities. This is a far too small box for this list. Okay. What happens is when you start listing all these things, you become clear about what all of this takes, and you might start thinking about trade-offs. Oh, do we really need that high-touch relationship? If we do, well then what does that mean in terms of areas where we won't have time? Or maybe we need more staff. That means we need more money to support staff. Or maybe we need more volunteers. Well, now we need a volunteer management program, right? So you start to realize what the trade-offs are in terms of where and how you're running your organization. Key resources, what that means is sort of the physical and intellectual resources that you have. Some of it's monetary resources, but often I think about what is it about these people, what resources do they have that allow them to do this? Passion, brand, like credibility, trust, experience, a place. Those are key resources. So what might you say with your organization?
I think volunteers are a great resource.
Volunteers?
Yeah. Yeah, there's just a lot of trust and
They have experience?
Yep.
I assume there's some passion there?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah? There's a place that they're working from?
Mm-hmm. So they have a huge building where all the stuff takes place.
They have some facilities.
Yep.
Okay, so that's what you're thinking about in terms of key resources. And then over here we have partners. So the partners, you want to think about who your partners are and how they're helping you with all of these things. So for my organization, we're an affiliate of Cornell University. Cornell University as a whole is a partner, but we have also different departments that we partner with. We benefit from their brand. We benefit from their space. They help us gain access to students. They help us gain access to alumni. There's a value proposition that we have because of our affiliation with Cornell that we wouldn't have otherwise. Right? So you want to think about your partners and how they're helping you with all these activities. How they're helping you gain access to participants or customers. So,
Yeah, so major companies like Shell, Toyota, and they have a lot of partnerships with schools, local schools, who also send in volunteers. And yeah, that's all I can think of right now.
okay. What you'll notice sometimes when you start filling out the partner section is that some of your participants are also partners. So you start to mention the donors and the sponsors,
Yeah.
right? That happens very frequently, especially in social ventures, because we're collaborators and co-creators by our very being. So often those people we serve are also our partners.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't be surprised if some of the women leaders,
They become trainers after they're fully trained.
right?
Yeah.
So that, don't be like, oh, that's weird, there must be something wrong. That's just a very typical thing to happen, that those in this column end up over here too.
Yeah.
So down here we've got, basically, we got our costs and our revenue. With nonprofits, this can look like tangible costs, money costs, but also non-monetized costs. So for instance, my organization, one of our projects is doing work with Palestinians in the West Bank. There are Palestinians in the West Bank who are part of a non-violent resistance movement to the wall that's being built by the Israelis. So this is a project that we very much support. We think of it as it's an important social justice issue. However, there is a political cost for our support, right? Given the controversy of this topic and the strong support in the United States, especially amongst Jews in the United States, for the Israeli government and what it's doing. So for us to support this organization, there is a political cost. There is a cost. We might lose donors. You know, there's time that has to be spent on, explaining why it is that we're supporting this project, right? So we want to think not just about monetized costs, but also non-monetized costs. So what are the most significant costs for this?
There are monetary
Think about
costs.
categories.
Monetary costs like buying of materials, like sewing machines, and materials, yeah. And just, I guess the other major cost would be of security, just because like they work with women and like minority members of society. There are a lot of threats from extremist groups, just because like, yeah.
Staff?
Yeah, they have,
There's might be insurance.
like
that you don't know about.
transport costs.
Transportation. So you want to think about what are your most expensive aspects of your organization. And then what are your revenue streams?
Well, a lot of the women and even the deaf people, they come back as trainers, so then that cuts off the costs for staff.
Great, so
And,
trainers, volunteers.
What else?
So you talked about sponsorship
Yeah.
and donations.
Mhm. I can't think of more. Sorry.
Okay. So in a for-profit business model, these customers would be paying some, right? There'd be revenue coming from these customers, and you would also have investors for the startup. In a nonprofit setup, usually it's these people who are providing most of the revenue, even though you can have earned income if these people are paying some to offset the costs of your services. So there's a few things of value that come out of using this. Like I said, it's a visual, and usually what they suggest you do is you use sticky notes, and you write these things up on the canvas like this, right? And that way there is a flexibility inherent to doing it this way, which allows you to be more in a brainstorming mode than when you write things down concretely in ink on a piece of paper. It's also really valuable when you start seeing that you want to maybe change something up. You want to bring in a new revenue stream or have a new participant group or a new customer. When you start doing that, all of a sudden you see that, oh, well, what kind of relationship are we going to have with them? How are we going to reach out to them? How are we going to deliver our value to them? What is the value that we're delivering to them? What does that mean about our activities? Can we afford it? Is there going to be revenue coming in to support that? Is that revenue going to offset the costs? Like, you immediately start to see the impact of changing any aspect of this on the other aspects of the model. It's on one easy to read map if you don't have my handwriting. What if you were to bring in new partners? Okay, what are those partners giving us? It's not just nice for them to be associated with our organization, but we want to make sure that we're getting value from them in different ways, and we can see very clearly what those are. The other benefit to this is if you need to give a presentation about your organization, it can be really to, let's say, a donor or an investor or to a potential partner. It can be really easy to present your entire model on one map using these sticky notes. You can start by saying, okay, these are our participant groups. This is the value that this is how we reach out, right? You can do it very quickly and easily in a way that someone can understand much better than reading text on a piece of paper. Are there any questions? We're late in the day.
How do you map all the questions that come up as you're reviewing all the different concepts that come in? As you're putting all your sticky notes up, how do you map all the problems that you foresee?
Like what?
As you kind of, you were describing that as you're going over it, kind of maybe as a company, as you're in a meeting, you're going over, putting up these sticky notes, you see where an issue comes up here, where it's resolved down here. How do you map all the issues or conflicts?
So one way to do that is to just have a separate piece of paper that says, oh, we want to make sure we think about these things. Like, we're brainstorming right now, so we're putting it all up, but we realize that we want to make sure that we're thinking about these, and just have a separate list. Or in your brainstorming, you can actually sort of spend time, like say on a retreat or something, spend time thinking them through right then and there. Yeah.
If this were a for-profit model, I'm just conflicted as to where we would put profit. Would it be in value proposition, or would it be in revenue, or do you have to split it and put it in several places?
Well, the purpose of a for-profit is to make a profit. So that is like a given outcome
Right.
of your for-profit organization. What ends up happening is that you need to look at your customers and think about whether you're getting the revenue you need from your customers to support your costs. What this map doesn't do is really nail down these two pieces. So you would need to create a different model to actually talk about income streams and costs more explicitly. So that would be a separate thing, okay, to look at those more carefully. The actual revenue model for your business. Anything else? All right, so you can go to businessmodelgeneration.org. They have the canvas, they have the app, they have the book. And then, like I said, you can use this to map out any project that you're working on. It really creates a nice, succinct visual for the various pieces to make your project work. So thank you for coming.